Hi, my name is Chad Merrill, and I'm privileged to be here to interview and to share with you three great faith-driven entrepreneurs that we have with us. So as we get started, to my left, we've got Jared Fulks, who's the managing director, managing partner of PureFlow. We've got Caleb Brakey, who's the founder of Renown Publishing, and Spencer Sutliff, who's the founder of Rugged Road Outdoors. So we're just going to start off by having them just tell a little of their story and the company origin story, and then we'll get into some conversation. So Jared, tell us about PureFlow.
Yeah, thank you for having us today. I'm so excited. I'm joined here by my wife, Megan, of 5 years. We live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I about 2.5 years ago realized that in my life I had this conflict of do I go into full-time ministry or do I continue in business, having come from some startup companies. And I quickly found out that there's an opportunity to do both. And so that's kind of what led me here today. I got involved in a business. We relaunched in 2020. It's called PureFlow. We're an asset financing company in Uganda and soon to be across East Africa. And it's a super exciting time for me as we get to tell this story to people like you, Chad, and others about what's happening there. And there's this big overarching problem in developing countries, and that is that there's not access to affordable financing. And so PureFlow looks to step into that gap by providing a solution to provide access to affordable financing for income-generating assets. If you've been to East Africa, you know there's motorcycles everywhere. They're like gnats. You can't get away from them. But you got to have them. It's how you get from point A to point B. And the problem that was found was that most of these guys don't own these motorcycles that they're using to provide an income for their family. And so PureFlow steps in the gap, and we provide access to affordable loans where they can actually move on a journey towards ownership of this asset that ultimately is going to create financial independence. Because previously they're stuck on these indefinite rent cycles where they can never get their head above water to look ahead for their family and for their kids. And so the great thing about it is that we're competing with a lot of other, if you will, microfinance, asset financing companies. And so our differentiator as men of faith, my partner, Colin Winrick, he oversees operations on the ground. The two of us have this passion to get people around the table. We looked at the life of Jesus, and if you look, it doesn't take very long, you'll see that he was constantly reclining at a table with people. And so in our model, the great thing is that we're trying to have a high-touch relationship with all of the people that are moving towards ownership. So they pay on a weekly basis, and when they pay, we have a seat for them at a table at one of our 5 branches where we actually get into the Word of God together. And so our team is fellowshipping with our members constantly as they're moving towards ownership. So that's who we are and what we're about.
Great. Thank you, Jared. Caleb, tell us.
So I'm here with my wife, Brittany, of 14 years, and our life has been about story since day one. We, of all things, were arrested on our honeymoon as suspected bank robbers. To this day, have not been able to top that story. 7 squad cars pulled us over. They had guns pointed at us. We were not bank robbers, by the way, but we spent all of our wedding money on books on writing. I was a journalist. I covered the New York Yankees for a season for MLB.com, and then God said, Caleb, you're going to use your pen for other ways. And so he called me into publishing, and we've been there for 15 years now, and it's the greatest privilege of my life to help those people who, maybe hiding the good stuff under a bushel. They haven't told their story. They haven't got that great purpose that God's been calling them to out. And to be able to bring our skill set of storytelling to them has been the greatest privilege of our life. So for the past 8 years, we've written about 200 books with our team. And we get to amplify the voices of amazing Christian men and women into the highest echelons of influence, which is what we really need, because the big problem today, and if you've seen it in your Barnes & Noble, is that the best books don't always get written. They really don't. Most people will find someone with a big platform, like YouTube, and they'll say, you have to write a book because you have a big platform. And they could have got that platform from maybe a viral video. But there's a lot of amazing people with incredible stories who think, well, because I don't have a lot of people that I know yet, I shouldn't write this, and that's just not true. So we love unearthing the incredible stories that God has. I mean, I can't meet one person at this conference. Even our Uber ride here, we found out he cooked for Nelson Mandela and presidents. Everyone has an incredible story. And so I love hearing it. I love unearthing it. If we talk, I know the first question I'll have for you is going to be, what's your story?
It's great. Thank you, Caleb. So Spencer Sutliff, tell us about Rugged Road.
Hey, so Spencer Sutliff, founder and CEO of Rugged Road. Not as cool as Caleb. Never got caught robbing any banks or anything like that. But, I've always been a bit of a serial entrepreneur from the time I was a kid, doing lemonade stands, things like that. And I was just always looking for, kind of that next idea, that next opportunity. And when I was a senior in high school, that opportunity came. There was a guy doing an demonstration at a high school chemistry class. He developed all this really cool stuff for the military. And one of the materials he'd worked on, primarily on the defense side, was this polyurea coating that they were putting on the bottom of Humvees to protect from roadside bombs and all kinds of really cool stuff. And a classmate of mine at the time, who'd been skinning bucks from the time he could walk, was like, hey, what if we took this coating, put it on a high-density foam core, and made like a lightweight Yeti? And I was like, wow, that's like a really cool idea. So, kind of off to the races after that, pursuing this concept to develop a high-performance cooler that you could actually take with you on pretty much any travel situation, any journey. For me, I like to rock climb, kayak, things like that. So the idea of something that's lightweight that can actually come along with you on all these different trips was really cool to me. But what was even cooler, no pun intended, is the fact that the cooler market is a several billion-dollar market, believe it or not, in the US. And I looked at all these industry giants, and I thought, what if you took just a sliver of the market share that they have, and you decided to commit to use your business as a tool to give back? And that's something I had some people in my life doing, modeling to me. And it was just something that was kind of like a light bulb moment to me that went off thinking, here's this opportunity that landed in my lap of, a way to kind of reinvent the wheel with what people are doing in this marketplace. And if we take that and use that as a tool to give back, a lot of good things could be done. So that's kind of the business side of what I do. And on the personal side, I've had the opportunity of my lifetime to go to Western Africa a handful of times, and I've seen firsthand the impact that clean drinking water can have on a community. And a lot of people in this room are probably familiar with some of the stories, but I've just seen, it almost makes me shake a little bit just thinking about it, but I've seen how when you get just that first cornerstone foundational block for a community, it's like a domino effect. And I've firsthand seen, villages when I was like 13 years old that had nothing. They were living like people did 2,000 years ago. And I was privileged to see these water projects put in place and go visit at a young age and then go back years later. And I saw these villages that had basically nothing, where this one solution had been solved. And when I came back years later, they had a market, they had a school, they had a little economy starting to thrive. So for me, I've tried to tie the two together of this solution for a market that has a need for lighter coolers in a very big market, and use that to grow the Rugged Road Foundation to focus primarily on wells, but other initiatives as well as we grow.
Great, thank you. So let's start with a few questions here. Jared, Uganda, motorcycles, microfinance. What gave you and Colin the inspiration? How did you decide to start the company? And just take us through that story of how that came about.
Yeah, so when I first heard the story, maybe if you've heard it now, you feel the same way. I was inspired, and I was inspired because I realized the depth of the problem that we're trying to solve, and knowing that we're just going to be a small piece of a huge problem. And I started thinking about what stuff do I have access to own? So everyone in this room has access to go get a loan on a car. Everyone in this room probably, maybe a lot of you actually have done this, but to get access to debt for a business, to grow a business. Most of us have access to finance a home. And the ability that does for us, just in America, living here where we were born, it puts us light years ahead of most of the world. And so when you break that problem at scale down to a very small piece, you look at these, just in Uganda, 1 million plus people that do this one thing for a living, and they cannot own that asset. It's a big problem. And so the heartbeat behind it was, how do we get people around a table where we can make disciples? That was the heartbeat of the foundation of PureFlow. And then, honestly, that's been the tension as we've scaled, because we don't want to drift from that focus. But, pun intended, the motorcycle became the vehicle in which we could build bridges relationally with people, or we could have an opportunity to invite them in to build community. And so, if you've been to most parts of the world, I would just say like Africa, we use Africa generally here, you'll notice that men work a lot. They work 7 days a week, 12, 14-hour days. They're not engaged in community most of the time. They're definitely not engaged in biblical community a lot of the time. Maybe outside, if you know people there, you might know a pastor, and you're like, well, no, they're always engaged in biblical community. They're kind of a one-off in that sense. So the general person that's working all the time is not engaged in the ability to look at God's word, to study it, to do it with other men. And so this is one opportunity where we actually go right after men who we believe are leading these households and these communities. And so our prayer is that as they move towards this financial independence, they're also, our prayer is that as they come around the table, that they're going to find their creator, and in doing that, they're going to have eternal impact in their communities and in their families, and we're seeing that already. So that's really how we solve the problem, and as we look to expand, it's into asset financing. And so the great thing is, like, our hope is that one day they have the same access to financing that I have, that you have, to build wealth for their families.
Great. Thank you, Jared. So, Spencer, we'll kick over to you. Just starting the company, you decided you saw this cool experiment in high school. You go off to college, and the idea is formed. How'd you go about starting Rugged Road? And kind of what do you do? What's the process? How do you get to market? Just tell us a little bit about the company.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I had done a couple different entrepreneurial endeavors in high school. Peachtree pressure washers were just pressure washing, and we had I could go on and on. We had Gwinnett Tree Cycle. We were recycling Christmas trees, all these random things. But the most serious one when I was a high schooler was we had launched a T-shirt company, and I won't go into the weeds of that, but we were in a handful of retailers, and I gained a lot of business experience through that. So for me, when I set off to pursue the cooler idea, I knew that we were going to have to have a brand to surround that. So immediately, we started selling some T-shirts and hats and backpacks, like basic sportsman apparel, just trying to get that foundation started. And so we had that going on one side, and then on the other side, I was going to as many mentors as I humanly possibly could. Like anyone who would just take 5 minutes, 10, 30 minutes with me, like if I could buy them lunch, even though I didn't have the money. Like if anyone would just sit there and kind of tell me how they got to where they went, I wanted to absorb that like a sponge. So I was at UGA at the time, and I would come home all the time and meet with a lot of different people who were in kind of positions that I wanted to be in someday, and just ask them for advice and see how they got to where they were going. And I definitely, took a lot of missteps early, because, I'm only 18 years old at the time, trying to work with different engineering partners and things like that. The biggest thing I think for me was just going to people who had that experience and just, learning from their experiences. Definitely saved me some time.
Great, thank you. So Caleb, how, in starting, you talked about wanting to tell stories, and how do you start a publishing company? I mean, what's the story there? And 200 books, you said. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
I'm kind of attracted to lights that I see covered under a bushel, if you will. And so the company started in 2014 with what we called the sermon to book method. And the idea was that if you've gone through a sermon series with a pastor, you probably have said this to the pastor, like, you have to write this down, you have to turn this into a book. And I realized that there was a lot of incredible messages collecting dust on a shelf. And so I said, we could turn this into a sermon to book method. And that's where we got started, helping pastors turn their sermons into books. And little did I know that God had bigger plans where now a lot of Christian leaders were coming and saying, hey, do you only do this for pastors? And I thought, oh, interesting. A lot of people still have everything inside them. And mostly the people I talk with, that's been there for 5 or 10 years. And they say, I've prayed about this, God's nudged me, but I've never actually taken a step because I don't know how to write. And that's where we got to step in. And now it's culminated into Renowned Publishing, where we get to go into organizations and tell their story. Because I think we have a great problem with the great resignation, the silent quitting of, I believe it was Sean today. Excuse me if I'm not getting the name right, but he said if people don't see purpose in it, they don't want to be a part of it. And story is how you find purpose. I told Jared here, I've told probably 3 people about Pure Flow, and the model was great, but it was when he got to that table that really made me think, I would go work for this company. I would go because I see the greater purpose.
We're hiring.
Good.
Is this like an Oprah moment?
And I heard the story, and I think that we need, as organizations, to tell our story more often, and not only that, but codify it, because we're living libraries, and in most businesses have a story that, once the founder calls it and doesn't share their story fully, that's a closed library. It's not going to be open again. And so to be able to walk in and do that gives me a great, great purpose that we are capturing the past to help us move us into the future.
And I would say too, like if you I know there's tons of business owners in the room, so I'm privileged just to be sitting here with you. But one thing that we've learned, and I'm talking about my generation, you've got to be intentional about telling the story of why you exist. And if you don't, you'll become obsolete by not being able to backfill people as people are retiring out or leaving the company. People genuinely want to be a part of something that matters, and you guys have heard that over and over. I think the challenge sometimes is that we're not doing a good job at communicating that outwardly about why we exist. We're talking about what we do and how we do it, but we're not talking about who we are and why we're doing it. And that's the heartbeat that, if you will, allows the hands and the feet and the mind to operate. It's the blood that's pumping through your body. And so you've got to be, I think, strategic about that. And it's something that we face all the time because, like I said, we're hiring a lot of people. And even in Africa, like, you can pay well and it attracts people. But it is the fact that we're trying to do something that's beyond just work, that's beyond just taking a paycheck, that is what attracts people to come and stay and work the long hours and invest and tell the story and bring their friends to also work alongside you. So.
That's great. So that's kind of turning something. Spencer, looked like you were going to say something, and follow on with that, or say you just talked about purpose and the why. So what's kind of your why, Spencer?
Yeah, so I talk to people and I say, like, our North Star is the wells, and that's our why. And some people would say, well, it's a cooler company. Like, what does that have to do with wells? Like a marketing brain is like, how can we tie that together? And sorry about the mic. I'm never good at these things. But marketing brain is like, how can we tie those two things together? And that's something we've worked on, getting that story. Like you were talking about how important that is. But I've definitely found on a smaller scale, as we're hiring people, as we talk about, again, I call it our North Star. Like, the reason I wake up and go do what I do, the reason I've taken the risk I've taken, the reason that the past 6 years, almost 7 years now of my life have looked the way they do is because of that why, because of what I see could be done in some of these communities. When I talk about that message, I've found people are willing to take pay cuts and come work with what we're doing because they really are buying into what we're doing. And to your point, it's not just about the money. We're always seeing, money can buy you this, money can buy you that. But when people really buy into that vision and that purpose, it's much sweeter than any amount of some large paycheck could give you.
I heard a very successful 27-year-old tell me recently, and I wrote it down in a quote. We were having a Zoom call, and he just said, off the cuff, without thinking about it, he said, millennials and Gen Z would rather starve with their friends than do something without purpose. And that stuck with me.
Yeah, so let's talk about purpose a little bit. You know, we're at the Fellowship of Companies for Christ International. We've spoken a little bit about, you know, being faith-driven and faith-driven entrepreneurs. What, you know, how do you develop, what is the purpose of Pure Flow? What is the purpose of Renown, of Rugged Road? What's that why that you all have been talking about, you know, why your companies exist? How do you connect your faith with your entrepreneurship? I think each of you all are kind of built to be entrepreneurial and be really faithful in that. So how do you connect your faith and work and the purpose behind what you do? Any of you all?
Yeah, so our purpose is to create opportunities for people to thrive. And so the initial, I think the old school way to look at that, if we wrote that out on our website, you would say, oh, that's for all these people I just told you about, you know, the almost 2,000 men that are coming every day to pay off their loan. And yes, it is that. But when we made that purpose, and that was kind of a part of our vision, was that it wouldn't just be for them. So we talk about, when I'm talking with our director of people and culture, we're talking about hiring people, and we're talking about retention of our team members. We're saying, how are we creating an opportunity for them to thrive? How are we creating an opportunity for their families to thrive? If their kids are not getting good educations, then I think we're failing at living that purpose out. And then ultimately, it's spiritually. How are our team members thriving? How are our members thriving? And then we also look, and we can talk about this in a second on the investment side, but we look at all of our partners that have helped us get where we are today, and we ask the exact same question. How are we creating opportunities for them to thrive? And that's kind of looking at the investment table a little differently, I think. It's typically like this push and pull, this dating relationship between investor and entrepreneur. And we use the word partner instead of investor because we want to say, how can we create opportunities for them to thrive? Whatever God's put in their table right now and they want to use it, how are we creating opportunities for them and their families to thrive? And then we asked that for our family, like how are we creating opportunities for Colin, his wife Caroline, and me and my wife Megan to thrive in the way that we're setting up everything in the business and thinking about our faith growing in the way that we are looking at growing the business. How are we thinking about being intentional and like pursuing our wives? How are we being intentional about getting in the Word of God, praying and fasting together? And those are all things that kind of all sum up that purpose, creating opportunities for people to thrive.
Great. Caleb, how do you put purpose in?
Jesus told stories, and I think we should too. A mentor of mine recently said that when God works, he uses people. And every time God works, there's a story there. And I think the beauty of story is that it invites people to get somewhere on their own. It's been shown that story sticks, as opposed to, let's say, if we put 4 bullets on the screen and tried to memorize it. Story sticks. And when you hear a story, it's not just someone telling you what to think, how to think, what to do, where to go. It is putting something in their mind that sticks, that allows them to think about it, allows them to think through their own perspectives, and allows them to get there on their own. Because for something to truly stick, to get into your heart and soul, you have to get there on your own with Jesus. And story is the perfect vehicle for it. A lot of people think they don't have something to say. And I'm like, if you have a story, you have something to say. Because I guarantee you, there are incredible life lessons. There's incredible, one of my favorite things was to hear my grandpa tell stories. And they stuck, but thinking about them now and what they meant, well, now that's turned into a lesson or a compass, a guiding North Star for me that I don't just think of as a directive, but as a story, and how I get to model that in my own life and my own circumstance from my own generation I've been born into.
Great. So Spencer, back to that question: how do you connect your faith to your work? As you find purpose as you go every day. How do you live that out at Rugged Road?
Yeah, so very similar to what Jared was talking about. Something that I'm passionate about is creating opportunities for those who wouldn't otherwise have them. And the way I see that, when I think about Jesus left the 99 to go find the one, or the shepherd left the 99 to go find the one. I think about, for me, across my lifetime, like I've always been very entrepreneurial, but I've struggled with school and things like that from time to time, and finding my purpose within Rugged Road really just changed my life in a lot of ways. And, from a hiring perspective, I've looked for opportunities to pull people into the business, and anyone watching this who works for us hopefully would agree, to create opportunities for them where they can really thrive, and try to lead in a way that kind of inspires them and might be a little bit different than some leaders they would see that don't have a faith. And I think that translates over to what we're trying to do with the Wells, and like Peace Prep Academy, some schools, inner city school in Atlanta, trying to do what I could do as we grow to kind of give a hand to create opportunities for those who might not otherwise have them. So kind of a generic statement, but it works in my mind for what we're doing from a hiring perspective, what we're doing with our employees, what we're doing with partners, and what we're trying to do from a giving back standpoint.
Great, thank you. So let's move a little bit to the kind of the formation. Each of you all have, capitalized. You had to raise money. There's folks in here that are both business entrepreneurs that have gone through that work, and also investors. We're going to talk to some investors a little bit later. So how did you go about that? Jared, we'll start with you. How do you capitalize your company? I'm thinking motorcycles, asset-based lending, banking in Uganda.
Risky business.
Yeah, you probably don't walk into your corner Wells Fargo and say, hey, I need to borrow money. How did you go about that?
That would be super nice, convenient, and easy if we could. They would laugh at us, and they would ask a lot of questions, and then laugh at us again. So, like I said, I didn't know that this space, you guys might have heard it as BAM, or now we've kind of got this term, faith-driven investor, entrepreneur, around it, or impact investing. There's a group you guys probably know of, NCF. They birthed a group called Impact Foundation, which is basically just a really unique vehicle that allows people to invest donor-advised money into socially good for-profit companies. So socially good for-profit companies. And so that's a big change for people now to be able to allocate resources that God's entrusted them with into businesses like ours that are either U.S.-based or international. And so we kind of found, we had a first adopter, I would call him. We had a meeting in Chicago end of 2020, and we asked, hey, could this model work? And because at the time we had 80 motorcycles, it was just over 2 years ago, or just under 2 years ago, and he was like, yeah, I'm in. And so we started there, and then we opened up kind of I guess you would call it like an opening round. It wasn't really like a seed round because we weren't giving away equity, but we raised some debt. And I remember sitting there, and we left, and we thought, wow, we just got $10,000. This is awesome. The business is going to blow up. But really what it did for us was it showed us that it was possible. And so from there, we went to kind of some of his friends and impact funds, and we started raising debt to finance, asset-based financing, to finance more motorcycles, because that's really how we scale. There's really not a market shortage right now. I said 1 million. We serve just under 2,000 right now, and so there's plenty of people that want to own these assets. So that's kind of how our journey started. Was we went right to this space to start telling the story, and the story, it captivated my heart, it captivated other people's hearts, and they wanted to put resources behind it.
Great. Spencer, I know yours is a little bit different. How'd you go about raising money? What do you do? I mean, to create the company needed some resources.
Well, I'd say like many things, there's probably a common theme here, that I do things a little bit differently. I tell people I'm a simple man. My daddy is a roofer, and I sell coolers. And being that, I call myself a simple man, at first, we kind of bootstrap things. I'd actually started the company with another guy, and we'd saved some money from high school. He had, traded stocks and done all this crazy stuff, and I'd started all these little businesses. So that was kind of how we got our seed capital. And then, we ran into some trials from there, lost some of that money with some engineers and things like that. But from there, we launched a Kickstarter. So I don't know if people are in this room are familiar with that platform, but it's a great platform where you can actually pre-sell products before you go into manufacturing to help pay for tooling and things like that. So we launched a Kickstarter. We're fully funded in the first 24 hours, and that was just a really exciting way to get the business started. But from there, manufacturing business is very capital intensive, more than I could ever imagined. So we went to raise money, the first investor I got, going back to when I said, I would just meet with anyone and everyone that would listen to me or even just take a meeting with me. There was a guy in the community around Athens, a very successful guy who owned a chain of retail stores. I was just meeting with him, talking about our needs, and he had just heard everything that we were doing and going through and, back to our purpose and just believed in what we were doing. Back to being a simple man, I said, hey, I think this is what the business is worth. Do you want X% for this? And that was how, I raised my first round of capital. And then from there, we've raised 2 additional rounds, and those were more of kind of a group thing from more of, I guess you could call that like private equity kind of thing. But that was a little bit more structured, but still just very kind of straightforward, walking through that process. And I think the key to all that for me has just been, I'm smart enough to know what I don't know, so finding people that can help me walk through that process, and then also just like brutal honesty and transparency. Again, sometimes I can be kind of an unorthodox, goofy kind of guy, but just very honest, very true about what we're trying to do. And I think that has worked really well as we've gone through these different raises, and we've gone through a lot of struggles. Like over the past couple of years, with COVID, shipping containers, and crazy different things that have happened, you've helped me walk through a lot of that stuff. I think that's been the key, just those open, honest conversations.
Great. So you mentioned a challenge. So why don't you all can be thinking about challenges a little bit here. Caleb, why don't you tell us challenges of being young, of starting a business, of persevering through, just what comes to mind when you think of challenges that you faced and how you've overcome them?
I tell people that I'm a writer who God called to do business, meaning I don't know how to do business. And when God first called me to step away from my job as a journalist, I talked about it with people in my life, my dad, others, and the common consensus was, I'm not seeing a path forward here. You can go to your mom and dad and say, I want to be an artist of any kind. It's pretty tough. And I remember thinking that, no, like God's called me to do this. I know He has. And I remember thinking that, I want my dad, my friends, others to believe in the results before they could see it. And I was out covering a basketball game, and I got a call from a friend who said, hey, I've got something coming up for you. And rewind 3 months before that. Basically, I was telling Brittany, I said, I don't know what's going on. And we weren't raised in a church environment that listened to God very much. But God started talking to me. God will find you whether you're in an environment that's conducive to it or not. And I got this surreal feeling that something was happening in mid-March. And I was telling Brittany this because I had never felt that before. I'd never felt the Holy Spirit truly prodding me with such preciseness. And sure enough, I'm out in February now. I'm covering a basketball game, get a call from a friend who I hadn't talked with in a year. And he said, hey, I heard you want to write. And I'm like, yeah. And he says, well, I think I have a job coming up that actually might be really good for that. And I go, really? And I go, well, when does it open up? He said, mid-March. And I was like, okay. And it was actually at retirement apartments, of all things. A job that didn't pay anything, but covered all of our overhead. And so we go and we interview for the job, Brittany and I. As I walked away, I said, I kind of did the Gideon thing. I was like, God, give me this job, and then I'm going to step out of my job as a journalist. And immediately I felt the Holy Spirit say, that's not how it's going to work. And I realized that I was doing to God kind of what I wanted others to do for me. God wanted me to believe before there was results. And so I took a drive. That's kind of my thing when I'm thinking and talking with God. And the next day I went in and I put in my resignation. And then 3 days later, we got the job at these retirement apartments. And equipped with $1,000, I started my business working as a night manager on $600 a month. And we've now grown it to, we've done about $3 million over the years.
Great.
That's we talked about this before. I think we've all kind of, as most of you, have taken some risk in getting into the entrepreneurial journey. It's part of it. It's in the description, I think. I remember when I first heard the story, I told my partner Colin, I'm in. Don't have to pay me anything. I've got 40 hours a week, and we did that for about 2 years. And it was because the story was more important to me than the paycheck, and I really just wanted to tell the story to people. Thinking about challenges, how many of you ran a business through COVID? All right, either you slept for a long time and then you woke up, or you're being honest with us here. I think that we faced a challenge early on. I don't know if you track world news much, but in Africa specifically, a lot of the countries just completely shut down because the healthcare was not built to be able to handle it if there was a bad outbreak. Like in Uganda, I think it was about 50 ICU rooms in the whole country, 48 million people. And so you've got a big issue there. If a lot of people need ventilators, you get a problem real fast. And so anyways, with that, we have a business that's a high-touch business, if you will. People that are driving motorcycles, our guys give 40 to 60 rides a day on average. So they're touching a lot of people. And if you've ever seen them, it's not just normally one guy on the bike. It's like a whole family behind you, so you've got really close contact with everybody. And so the first thing that happened when they shut down schools for 2 years, by the way, and then they said no boda business. So people just weren't going anywhere. And so this was June and July. We had just taken on our first round of debt. And so in our business, we take on debt, we buy motorcycles, and we deploy the capital within 3 or 4 days so that we're not sitting with it in risky business area. And the debt's deployed, meaning we need people to pay us next week so that we don't have people defaulting on the loans. But then none of the people that we were serving could work. And so this created a massive challenge for us. And I'll say this, if you're the chief problem solver at your company, then you should hire more problem solvers. It's actually one of our 4 core values is to move towards solutions, not think about the problem, but recognize it and move towards solutions. And we hire people on that because we know situations like this are going to happen, and all the more when you work in Africa. But this happened, and our team, who first core values serve with purpose, are driven by that, saw a problem, and they wanted to move towards solutions. We ended up feeding, I think, we deployed about 250,000 meals. We're not a meal organization. We let everyone, if they couldn't pay, not pay for 2 months, and we fed all of our members and their families at least 2 meals a day for 2 months. And that was because our team, it wasn't our brilliant idea. Like I said, we're not the chief problem solvers. We're part of it, but they came to us and said, this is what we need to do. This is the right thing, and we can do it. And there was a lot of prayer and fasting from our team, and just a lot of moving towards solutions. So I'd say that's one of the biggest challenges we face, is kind of that we went on the limb, put debt into the business, had our name on checks with people, and then that happened, as I think God would want to test our faith, and in that grow our obedience to please Him.
It's great. Spencer, what's the challenge or two have you had? You've had some unique challenges over the last couple of years.
Yeah, so, there's a bit of a laundry list of challenges, as you guys know, and everyone in this room starting different businesses. But, if I had to pick one, it'd probably be the fact that, 2 years ago, we kind of did a bigger capital, or about a year and a half ago, bigger capital raise. And we were coming, on the coattails of COVID. And shipping containers, some of the people in this room might know, went from $4,000 a container door to door to about $30,000 a container. So for us, that means that they went from, less than $10 a cooler to over $60 a cooler. And for me, the knee-jerk reaction was something like that. It's like, oh my goodness, how are we going to survive this? And that's where I'll pause that story and go back to the fact, for me, it's a little surreal as we talk about challenges. The opportunity to me be able to sit on the stage right now. Because a couple years ago, or I guess 2 years ago to be specific, I was invited to this conference which was just kind of a radically life-changing moment for me, because while I'd always thought that we wanted to do the wells, and I'd had a lukewarm faith, I was really looking at things as if Rugged Road was my business, and I was going to use it as a tool to do good and a tool to give back, and I was going to take on the cooler market and do all these great things. And it was actually Bill Job, who might be sitting in this room, was giving a talk here, and he was like, raise your hand, like if you believe in God, and do you believe He created the universe and everyone in it? I'm like, yes, I'm kind of following along. And he's like, well, if you believe someone's that powerful, like, do you really think he's in heaven scratching his head thinking like, how do I get more money to do good? And it like hit me. I was like, that's a really good point. Like he's probably not struggling on that front. But the point he was trying to make, or at least what I took from it, and maybe if you're in this room, maybe I'm paraphrasing wrong, but was that God's in control and it's His business and we're a steward of it and He will do what He wants with the business. And so I share that to say that before really embracing that concept, I lived with a lot of anxiety. Like I'd never really had anxiety growing up and things like that, but as the business started to grow and we did start to face these challenges and problems, I was taking a bunch of courses at UGA and taking on a bunch of debt, taking on a bunch of risk, and I was getting to the point where I was literally laying on the floor holding my chest, like just in a ton of fear and anxiety. And then fast forward to another talk, I think it was Dr. Blackaby was saying that in life, when we're feeling anxious or we're feeling afraid or we're feeling some of these negative emotions, we should look at them as a check engine light or a warning light on the dashboard of our truck, because it means that we've forgotten God's in control and we're not turning things over to Him. And I even get like chills through my whole body as I talk about that, because it's awesome how you can just feel the Holy Spirit in this room, and that's part of why I've come back the past 2 years. But tying all that back in to the problems with the shipping containers, I think that's the kind of thing that truly before this experience and before just kind of flipping the way I looked at things, I think it would have like taken me out, which sounds so dramatic, but like I don't know what would have happened in the business. I'd know certainly like for me, that amount of pressure probably would have just crushed me. I would have been miserable to be around, and it would have been really difficult. And it still was difficult, and I'm a human being, I'm very imperfect. But whenever I can remind myself, like He has a greater plan, and whether Rugged Road goes on to be a $100 million business, or whether it crashes and burns and teaches me a lesson and I can use that to demonstrate the love of Jesus in that process, it doesn't matter. Like He's in control, and when I really press into that and believe that, there's almost like no stress with these challenges. So I know that was like a huge segue from your question, but I wanted to address that because back to that container thing, that's probably one of the biggest things I faced in the past 2 years, because we're talking, that was over a $500,000 swing in shipping, and we did 1.2 million in sales that year. So it was pretty brutal what that did to us. But again, just trusting Him, walking through that process made it entirely different. So,
Great. So with a few minutes left, I'd love to just kind of hear from all of you. What do you think's been kind of the most important part of growing your company? You had an idea, you've had a vision, you might have had technology involved, shipping, finance, capital, people in your life. Jared, what do you think's been the most important part along your journey?
Yeah, so I mentioned this earlier. We don't reference our investors as investors. We reference them as pure flow partners. And there was a chapter 1 of Philippians. Paul's talking to the church there, and he talks about this partnership in the gospel and how it encourages him so greatly. And that had kind of been on the back of my mind before we had our very first investor call, which is what we were going to call it. And I remember thinking, that's what's happening here. God's saying there's a story I'm writing that's far bigger than any one of you. Pure flow is a small thread in a small blip of time and space when I'm thinking about eternity. And He's allowed us to be a part of stewarding that story. And the same thing is true for every person that was showing up to that call. And so I would say the most important thing is partnership. We really do value that immensely. Colin and I talk all the time, and we've told our wives when we signed that 40-page operating agreement between he and I thought, I didn't think like I'm signing myself away to this guy. I felt like, man, God, I'm so grateful that you would give me a partner to walk this journey with who's aligned in faith, who wants to lead his family well, who wants to love Jesus more than anything else, and also just loves this business. And so we've kind of taken that approach between he and I, but also as we get more people around the table's getting fuller. We look at that, and there's that, I was thinking about it this morning, there's an African proverb, funny enough it came from Africa, but it says if you want to go fast, go alone, right? It says if you want to go far, what does it say? Go together. And what's funny is, I feel like we've gone fast and far, and we've done it with partners. And I don't think that looking back, we would try to do it any other way at this point. And so that's why we're always trying to find more partners, because when you get more people at the table whose core focus is to love Jesus and make him known, the other things will take, they'll take place. Everything will kind of trickle down from that. And so that's been the biggest thing for us. And it's amazing what you can learn when you're not the smartest person at the table, and you keep getting people that have more experience, more faith to sit around you and do the journey with.
That's great. That's great. Spencer, what about you? What do you think's been?
Well, I mean, you put me in a hard spot here because Jared keeps taking my points. But no, I mean, very similar to what he's saying. I was talking about it a little bit earlier, but just finding those mentors and, like he was saying, people that, have kind of been there, can see around corners, have deep faith. I mean, Chad, you've been a huge person in my life over the past 2 years that has run businesses, has a deep faith, knows how to walk the walk, talk the talk, and just everything in between. So finding people like yourself and lots of other mentors in my life, we've gotten farther in the past 2 years than we did in the first 4.5, solely through that. Again, I think that's such a big piece of the puzzle here is surrounding yourself with not only people who are successful in the business world, but people who have deep faith and they walk that faith out. So that's been really important to us. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've done that perfectly. And it's like, oh yeah, we've already accomplished that. Like that's something I'm continuously striving for day after day after day. And it's a continuous walk. And I'm so grateful to have you walking through that with me and other people in this room and maybe some people watching this. Because it's been a really exciting past 2 years to see what's happened. And I'm excited to see what happens over the next 5, 10, 50 years.
Caleb, your thoughts around that?
Both Jared and Spencer hit it. It's about people. And frankly, I'm coming out of the other side of that, what that looks like. First 6, 7 years of business, really tried to do it all on my own. And that led to a lot of stress, anxiety, feeling as though things were on my shoulders. And then God told me very specifically, I believe it was 2020, you need to stop. Like this is truly, it's my business. You get to be the manager. And I'm like, man, that sounds pretty good. Like that means you get to tell me what to do, and but you're the big man responsible. And that led me to FCCI, Praxis, Lion's Den, Community. And I had a fun talk with Brittany not long ago. I said, look at this. And I showed her my calendar and the places we would be and the talks I was having with people. And every single one of them was tied to what God had started stirring in me. Every relationship, mentors, opportunities, clients, everything came from people. And God, we are made from community for community. And if you're starting a business, you're still doing a business, you've been at it for a while, don't go it alone. Look for others who are, you don't want to be the smartest one in the room. You don't want to be the best prayer in the room. You don't want to be, surround yourself because they're out there. And God allowed us to be a team to go far.
Great.
Can I give an invitation real quick? Not like a y'all come to the front invitation, but I was just thinking about this room and like we've all talked on it, and we're stages behind, I think, a lot of people here in regards to just experience and how you're leading your business and your families and communities. The invitation is there, and there's many more than the three of us that are seeking to go on this journey where we say, God, you take this business, and we want to be stewards of it. And I think that word partner is important for every person in this room. If you're not doing that, to think about how you could be doing that, because you have a wealth of resource. Most of it is experience and your story that can be brought to the table, and people would love to pull up a seat for you if you'll just show up to the house, and would love to walk the journey with you guys.
So I think that's a great place to wrap up. We've only got 3 or 4 minutes. You can take a look at the clock, and I'd love just to tell, if you have a message to the crowd about, your generation, being an entrepreneur, an ask of the crowd, what's a final thought that you'd like to leave folks? Spencer?
Yeah, no, I think one thing that was really clear to me when I came here 2 years ago is, this room, I almost don't even feel worthy to be sitting on this stage. And I'm not just trying to be nice. This room is filled with people who've been here for 10, 20, 30 years. And you guys are business owners. You have walked the walk. You have just profoundly gone deep with your faith. And the results of making that commitment year after year after year are pretty incredible. And again, with that invitation, I think there's a lot of people that could greatly benefit from just the knowledge that's just exuding from the people in this room. And I know I certainly have, and I know there's a lot of people that desperately need that. So from a business standpoint, but also from a faith standpoint, and how do you tie the two together?
Great, thank you. Caleb?
Keep modeling the Jesus way for us. I'm humbled to be in this room with all of you. The experience, the stories, and I say Jesus model in that keep sharing your stories, keep seeking people out, especially younger generation, because we need guidance. We need a North Star. So seek us out, tell us your stories, and do that thing that Jesus did a lot, ask a lot of questions. Because it's a great way of saying, hey, you're kind of doing this wrong, without saying it in that way, asking questions, and let us get there by ourselves. Let it be our idea, if you will. I find that's an incredible way, and it's what my mentors do to me all the time. And now I go, oh, you're doing that thing again. I'm like, yep, he is.
Well, great, guys. So what I heard, just to kind of wrap up here, first, I hope you've been inspired. You've got 3 of many, many just incredible entrepreneurs that are coming from, Gen Z and millennials and above. So for me, it gives me a lot of faith in the future. It gives me a lot of hope for the future. But what I think you literally just heard all 3 saying is, we need help. We heard Rick Fisher this morning. We heard Dr. Carson last night. We heard Sean Dunn a few minutes ago say that we need you. This is an active sport. Life is a team sport. And everyone in here can mentor. Everyone here needs to look around and see who is the person that they're walking beside. Who are they challenging? Who are they supporting? Who are they investing in? We're going to talk about investment in our next section here. But hope you all have enjoyed meeting these guys, and it will give you a vision of the future and a way to engage the next generation. And so thank you all for coming. Thank you, Jared and Caleb and Spencer. They'll be around. Get in touch with them. There's other folks that are in the room, and just engage the next generation. So thank you all.